How's it going? I was just thinking the last week anyway that we've had in it that having foreign influence in the country doesn't always work out too good, but it got me thinking about the Norman invasion. So I decided I kind of started writing out notes, and I'd read it out as far as the the uh, the Normans actually taking control of the situation, because it 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 was the King of Leinster, Dermot McMurrow, that caused all the grief to begin with. Actually, well, you could blame his girlfriend, but um, yeah. So just a brief rundown what the kind of situation was in the country at the time. Uh, Ireland's had a good few kind of, you could say, like epochs between, say, in the beginning. Obviously, you had the beginning of the king system. Then you had a guy, his name was Ockay, or Oe, whatever you want to call him, the ninth, and he created the provincial system. And way back, like, people used to see that as a major problem, because of the it was basically dividing the power of the state up amongst several kings. Like, but it was basically to keep everybody happy, because the place was kind of falling asunder under one king all the time. So to keep everyone happy, he divided it up a bit. But obviously, in the long run, it caused a lot of hassle. So yeah, the after the provincial set up, there was a thing in around 100 AD, roughly. Would have been, I think it was in around the era of King Conor MacArch. There was a thing, the plebeian revolution, which was basically the remnants of the Forbolg and the two-headed Danann. They were under the control of the Milesians, who would have been, like, the O'Neills, like, the modern Gael, basically, like the rulers of the country in Gaelic times, like. Um, well, the two-headed Danann and the Forbolg, they were led in a kind of a bit of a, whatchamacallit, yeah, revolution, like, against the leaders at the time. But they done it. It was a leader called Carbra King Catch, which is basically means the cat ear, the charioteer. And he was from out in Connacht somewhere, but basically they slaughtered. It was like the night of the Red Knives. Like, I remember seeing what you call it, an episode of one of the few episodes I watched of the Game of Thrones, and it's the one where they start poisoning each other and all this kind of crack. And I just got up. I couldn't watch it, like, because it was like, this is such a blatant rip off of Irish history. It's just unbelievable. Like, so that kind of sickened me. But yeah, basically they done that to the Milesians, and that weakened the country massively. Obviously, because there was so many well, dead leaders. Basically, a lot of lawlessness in the country kind of reigned after that. Um, then, well, not long after that, the country ended up going to war to try and figure out who was going to lead the country, and that wound up. You probably heard of Con's half and Mug's half, which is basically, well, Conor MacArch, to try and unify the country, went to war with Monat or Mugnat, whatever you want to call him. He was the leader of Munster, basically, and they drew a line from roughly where Louth is down to Limerick. Con ruled above it, and Mug was below it. So yeah, how is everyone, by the way? I'm just looking at the chat there, but yeah, hope you aren't too bored already. Like, but this is kind of an interesting now bit of history, I think. Anyway, like. But anyways, I'll probably end up going on rakes of tangents. But sure, I suppose after Ireland was relatively settled, well, relatively. While, like, you had in England the collapse of the Roman Empire, you had all these like massive, like, wars across the whole of Europe, basically. And Ireland was kind of, it was all right, like, they kind of avoided a lot of this kind of stuff. But obviously there was a big problem a couple of hundred years later called the Vikings that landed. And the Vikings, they're kind of like one of them things, like, it's like, all these I don't know what pagan LARP kind of stuff like this that you hear about, like, all the Vikings, Power Odin and all this. Well, the Vikings actually weren't that good at fighting, like, you hear all this kind of crack. They weren't to be laughed at, like, but they weren't like this unstoppable force. Like, basically their tactics were that they'd land in a boat, like, they had a flat bottom boat, so they could go up very shallow rivers. So they'd just go up to a lake and sit in the middle of the lake. Whenever night came, then they'd disembark the boat, get out and raid all the like little villages and monasteries and everything in the area. But whenever they actually got into fighting in open battle, like say like Brian Boru and Clontarf, so like they got their heads handed to them, like because they couldn't get reinforcements. They did no really to run, like because people could chase them back onto their boats, like So they weren't actually like these fantastic guys, like. But oh yeah, that was actually a lot of like ring forts you see in Ireland as well. They're actually they would have been from that era as well, because the Vikings, if they were moving inland, they'd pile up stones on top of the hill so that they could retreat back there at night, and then they could cover a big area, take out a load of villages, store the hoard there, and then whenever they were ready to go, then they could all carry the hoard back down to wherever their boats were sitting, So that's where a lot of them forts came out of. But yeah, I suppose another tangent, like one of my favourite things in Irish history, and I only heard this by chance, was a guy telling me about where the phrase up the banner comes from. And that was from Brian Boru going into battle against the Vikings, like, because the standard bearers were walking and they seemed like, the Vikings used to do the berserker thing, going nuts, like cutting themselves and screaming and shouting and all. But yeah, but Brian Boru, like, seeing that his standard bearers at the front were kind of like, they were like, oh shit, like what's going to happen here? And they started like lowering down Brian Boru's flag, which was the same colours as the County Clare banner today. But he rode out in front of his horse, and I met a guy, he knew the full speech like off by heart in Irish and in English, He was saying it to me, and I swear to God, the hairs was up on the back of my neck. It was class, like. But basically, like he gave this big speech about like the spirit of the Irish and everything, like, and the next thing at the end of it, he just started roaring, up the banner, up the banner. It's, if someone could, like, if you can find that, what he said anywhere, it's absolutely fantastic. Like, I remember the guy gave me the name of the book and everything, he got it out, and it just, I didn't have a pen at the time, and it's just kind of gone out of my head, But anyways, like, Ireland's gone through a couple of epochs, like, and I suppose now you have a kind of a globalist epoch that's entered into the country, which is obviously an existential concern. Like, but before, like say 1916, like obviously the watershed, the pivotal moment of modern Irish history. Like, it doesn't take a genius to figure out, like, that kind of began with the Normans, like 1167 and all that, But yeah, it's kind of funny. Well, not funny, but it's kind of a weird one how it started. Like, when I in schools here, anyway, like, very, very little. There's not much details on what happened. It was just that, the King of England backed some soldiers coming into Ireland, and then they, got married in with the Irish, and now this is Ireland. There wasn't much detail kind of gone into it. But, so I just thought I'd go through it a wee bit. And basically, as I said at the start, it all began with a guy who was actually an Irish king, who was playing the field a bit. But what happened was, there was a young woman called Dervla, and Dervla was the daughter of the King of Meath, and she was married off to Tiernan O'Rourke, who was the Prince of Breffni. And that's an interesting name too, because nearly 400 years later, it was O'Rourke's castle that O'Sullivan Bear was trying to get to. The last Gaelic king was Tiernan O'Rourke, But this is about the last High King, and that's an interesting question, because everyone thinks, it was Brian Boru. It was actually the guy who was in charge at this point. His name was Rory O'Connor from Connacht. But anyways, yeah, Dervla got married off to Tiernan O'Rourke, but the thing was that she used to have a thing growing up with this guy, Prince of Leinster, Dermot McMorrow. And she was unhappily married to Tiernan O'Rourke. So basically, she sent a letter to him saying, will you come and get me out of this unhappy marriage? I want to elope with you. And Dermot was like, oh, she is. I couldn't say no to her. So his capital was in Ferns, I think it's in Wexford. It's a wee town there today, but that was the capital of Leinster back in these days. So he went off with an armed guard of maybe about 12 cavalry, something like that, a small amount of cavalry, and met her at a pre-decided place. And took her on the horse and brought her back down to Ferns, you know. So, anyways, obviously the husband, Tiernan O'Rourke, wasn't overly delighted with this, uh, happening whenever he woke up in the morning. So he went to Rory O'Connor and he said to him, like, I've been massively offended here. Like, great, like someone's literally after like eloping with my wife, another king. Like, can you, like, this has to be, sorted out one way or another. And Rory O'Connor was like, yeah, in fairness, not on. We'll get it sorted. So Rory O'Connor decided, right, I'm going to tell my men to get armed, get my army ready, the Royal Army of Ireland. And we're going to go into Leinster and we're going to say, Dermot, you have to do something to sort this out. That was grand. Breffni, Oriel, Meath, and their armies and the Royal Army decided to band together and go into Leinster, down to Ferns, and either take this woman back or get some kind of retribution for what was after happening. So, they marched into Leinster basically, and the people in Ferns, like the allies of Dermot McMurrough, they were all called together by Dermot McMurrough to try and decide, like, like a council, to see what he should do. But the whole lot of them just sent back word to him. They're like, look, you're completely away mad. We're having nothing to do with you. You're on your own. So basically, he had no generals. His priests had excommunicated him from the church. He had no soldiers willing to listen to him. Like, he was completely, done for. Like, so what he done was he left. Basically, he was like, "There's nothing I can do here anymore. I've been completely swindled out of my land." So he went to France to try and get the help of the King of England, of all people, Henry II, who was fighting in Aquitaine at the time against the French. As that was his fucking main pastime, was just fighting with the French. Like, but he. Let me see, where was he? Oh yeah, fighting with the French. He went off anyway, and he went to Henry II. Went looking for Henry II. In the meantime, the Royal Army landed in Ferns, and they went up to Dermot's castle, and they took Dervla out of it, and they burnt the fucking whole place to the ground. Basically, just leveled the entire castle. At that point, Dervla was kind of like, she was kind of, I don't know, damaged goods, I suppose, in a kind of a 12th century sense. Like, she was sent off to live in the monastery of St. Bridget of Kildare. And it's kind of like, there's not really much said about her after that. Like, she just kind of lived out her days as a nun, But what happened was, anyways, whenever Dermot was in France, he went up and he asked for an audience with King Henry II. And King Henry was like, Sham, I'm a bit busy at the minute. Like, I'm fighting a war here, but I'll send the message on ahead to Britain that if you can raise an army yourself, with whoever's there that's not fighting for me at the minute, and you start the war back in Ireland, I'll come in and I'll help you afterwards. That was grand. Dermot was like, it's better than nothing. So he sailed anyway, and he landed in I think Bristol, I think, was where he landed. Basically, he went up to the guys that was running the city and said, right, I was told that I'm allowed to gather up an army to go invade Ireland. Tell everyone that's kind of, fit for the job, like, that I'm here looking for them. So it was all right. Very, very few people still, even in England at the time, wanted to get involved with a disgraced king of Irish king, so they were Irish prince, I suppose. So his options were fairly limited, but who he did find was a fella from Pembroke, who was basically bankrupt. He had been an earl, and he had wasted all his money, sold all his land, gambled it all away, drank it all away, and he was a complete clown, basically. His name was Richard Strongbow. So anyways, Richard Strongbow, he was chatting to Dermot, and Dermot at this stage was just like, he was clearly mad for revenge. Like, he just wanted just everything. He wanted to fucking shaft everyone that had fucking been involved with Rory O'Connor or any of them, Tiernan O'Rourke, anyone. he was just mental at this stage. Like, anyways, um, he says to Strongbow, he goes, if you can help me raise an army, I'll make you like, I'll give you like your own earldom. I'll let you marry my daughter so that you'll be the next king of Leinster if we win. Like, that's how desperate McMorrow was to get his land back. Like, that he'd give it away basically. Um, there was let me see now. Oh yeah, sorry, I was about to jump ahead there. I'll try and keep it all together. But basically, what happened then was that there was a couple other characters came in that afraid. It was Morris Fitzstevens. I think I have names written down here somewhere. I must try and figure out where I left them. But there was Morris Fitzstevens and Richard Le Gros and all these kind of like Norman dudes who, obviously didn't have the best of reputations, or they wouldn't have been mingling with this disgraced Irish fella. Like, but there was, let me see now, which is I've loads of notes actually. Oh yeah, but leadership of hiking. So I'm just reading over this here at the next page. Oh yeah. Geez, this is awful with the dead air time. Like, I'm just after seeing an extra load of notes that I wrote down. In May. Oh yeah. Right, anyways. So anyway, after Dermot had been gathering up all these Norman fellas that didn't have a hope, they he went back with whatever soldiers he had gathered at that stage, which was 500 horsemen, and he went back to his little village that he had left in Ferns and hid there, basically. So that he was waiting until the Norman guys, that they could arm themselves and get ready and sail over into Ireland. But what they done at the start was they came in a trickle, like, as pretending to be merchants and traders and monks and all this kind of crack, and letting on like, oh, we're here to help Leinster rebuild itself, we're here to enrich it after all it's been through, all this kind of crack, So anyways, not so long after that, a few months later, there was enough fellas basically in and around Leinster that they could call on the English, like, to get this thing started. And it was Morris Fitzgerald. Sorry, he came with a right few lads, like, basically about I think numbers. The numbers matter really. I'm just kind of telling the story, I suppose. They came with it must have been 1,000 or more men anyway. But what he done was oh yeah, here we go. Yeah, what he done. Oh fuck. Sorry about this, folks. 2 seconds. Missed a bit of the story, but sure, I can fill it in after. Whenever Leinster, or whenever Dermot had a bit of a landing party ready, like, what he done was he went into Wexford. And Wexford was like a kind of a very it was kind of it was a Viking town, so it had better defences than most of the Irish towns. Most of the Irish towns at that time, it wasn't part of Irish military kind of procedure to fortify places, because the Irish used to fight on open fields, like on open ground. They wouldn't have been big into like siege warfare or anything like that. So whenever they went to Wexford anyway, and Wexford was just like, we're not able to fight all these fellas, like, so they just surrendered pretty much straight away, like, and just said, right, you could be in charge, because we're not going to be getting into this fucking big mess of a thing over something so small, So they gave them, a few pound and said, right, whenever you have something major to say, we'll listen to you, like, we'll be what's the word, like, we'll have fidelity to you, we'll be honourable towards you. But all this while, it was kind of like the Irish were kind of like sitting back, because they were like, all right, that's only the Vikings, like, that's the only ones running Wexford. They're like, they're no friends of ours, like, so they were like, fuck it, live and do it. But after Wexford, there was further reinforcements from from the Norman side. Like Strongbow still hadn't landed at this stage. He was still over in England, like building up troops and all that kind of crack, and he was doing some paperwork because like he was disgraced in England as well. Like so, he was like asking the king's permission, King Henry II's permission, to go and start ransacking Ireland basically. And the King of England was like, do whatever the fuck you want. I have nothing to do with you, that kind of mindset to it. But whenever it goes back to whenever Dermot, whenever his advisors all abandoned him the last time, that the Kingdom of Austria was kind of like a vassal state, or not, kind of a vassal state, a protectorate of Leinster, and they had abandoned him. Like so, whenever obviously, like one of his first ports of calls was to kick the head of anyone that had fucking abandoned him. Basically, like McMurrough was just out for revenge. Like he didn't care what happened really. Like he was just going to tear the whole thing down. So he marched into Ossory, which would be like kind of West Leinster, Boris and Ossory, would be that kind of part of the country. And he went in and basically demanded, like, you serve me now, you give me your money, kind of thing, same as Wexford. They were like, right, look it, we're sorry, let's let bygones be bygones. Here's some cash, whatever. At this stage now, the O'Connor, he was kind of like, Jesus, this lad's back and he's attacking kings again. So this obviously isn't this isn't going to be a good thing. So oh geez, I'm after I missed a good bit of the story, but sure. Anyways, I can go back in it. Get a white worker back into it. The after all that happened, O'Connor was like, right, we're gonna have to go back down and start fucking really talking serious to this fella. So they went down anyway, the Royal Army, and they met. Well, they were kind of getting towards the place anyway, and Dermot was well outnumbered still at this stage by the Irish Royal Army. Like this was a little festering thing. This was the mindset at the time, was that this invasion, it wasn't really an invasion. It was more of a kind of a tiny little revolt of a few hundred people. Like it was small. It was something that could be easily handled. It wasn't a big wave. Like but this is how it's the same story nearly always throughout Irish history, where nothing happens and then it happens all at once. Like it's like a little trickle and then just a flood. And that's the way it went this time too. Like it was basically the Royal Army marched down and met McMurrough, and they were both lined up ready to fight. And McMurrough then surveyed the battlefield, seeing he was massively outnumbered. So he went back towards Ferns and he hid in the forest, him and his troops. So when he was in, O'Connor, he was like, right, well, we're going to have to sort this out now at this stage. Like, I'm after gathering my troops for the second time over the head of this book. So he sent a messenger, and it was this guy, Fitzstephen, was the general of the Leinster Army under Dermot at the time, and he sent him, he was another disgraced fella. He sent him a message, basically, get out, don't come back, just stay away from the country and call this at an end right now. And the only reason that they didn't go in and kick the head of them was it was the priests at the time who had actually already excommunicated them, but they were warning, this will end up in a civil war if you keep attacking all the time to the High King. But anyways, the message was sent, and Fitzstevens, because he was such a douche in England, he had nothing to lose. So he sent back a message. He's like, I will fight ye to the last man, because the only future he had was to keep fighting and try and take whatever he could off the Irish, basically, which was the same as all these Norman boys. Like, there were a lot of scummy bucks. It was like ISIS, the bottom of the barrel. But yeah, the O'Connor, and he was whenever he got this here, he was told, "Leave off them. Maybe they might calm down if they get if they get a wee bit of land, they might be happy enough, whatever." Uh, he was like, "Right, fuck it, we'll try and get a bit of a peace going anyway." O'Connor, for you can call him lazy or too laid back or whatever, but he was. He was a kind of a peacemaker, Like he tried peace. Like he came up with a peace treaty, and this was the peace treaty. Dermot got his land back. He became the King of Leinster again, and he got paid by the Irish for whatever soldiers was killed or whatever money he had lost because of him losing his kingship for a while. But in return, uh, Dermot McMurrough would swear loyalty to King O'Connor, High King O'Connor. Um, there's a couple of wee deals then to make this work out. A couple of wee side notes was that Dermot would never ever again ask the English for help. That he couldn't go to England and start whinging to them if something went wrong for him. That Fitzstephen's could stay in charge of Wexford that they had already taken because fuck the Vikings. And Dermot's son, who was called Arthur, that O'Connor would take him basically as a hostage, and keep him under a watchful eye as a kind of a guarantee that all of this here was kept right. That if whatchamacallum, McMurrough started acting up, that he could just behead his kid basically. So, anyways, this peace deal was signed, and O'Connor thought, right, that's the end of it. That's sound. But the problem was that Dermot knew something that O'Connor didn't know, which was that Henry had already promised him reinforcements to come whenever they got a bit of slack in France, that they weren't fighting as much. So, anyways, some of the English landed in here, more under another outcast of the Norman. They were kind of brought in trickles again, and they held a council basically. This Fitzstevens and Fitzmaurice was the guy that came in the next time, and Dermot. They held a council together, and they kind of egged, they had nothing to lose, So they egged Dermot on. It's like, really now we should push that you'd become the High King of Ireland. That was the idea. So Dermot agreed anyway because he was like, yeah, fuck it, sure, we'll just tear the whole place down, And the next big plan for them was that they were all going to attack Dublin. And so they started marching for Dublin anyway, and they went into Fingal and they wrecked the place, pillaged the shit out of it, burnt it down, and started marching on towards Dublin town. And the Viking who was in charge at the time was Asculf, and Asculf heard about Fingal getting wrecked, so he basically called together his circle and said, "What do we do?" They were like, "We give them money. We're buying our way out of this." So they basically just gave them, buckets and buckets of gold and silver to the King of Leinster and the Normans. So and it's another character enters the fray after this happens. After the Leinster men and the Viking in Dublin, after they sign a kind of a temporary peace treaty that neither of them can attack each other, as a part of the payment, So Raymond Le Gros, for kind of a famous enough name, he landed outside Waterford, and whenever it was only a small few, maybe I don't know, you'd be 100 or so men on boats landed, and they landed in a little bay. So they started fortifying this little area outside Waterford town, up on a hill near the beach. And at this point, Waterford, it was owned by the Dacy. I think it was O'Quailon or something was the king of the Dacy at that time. But anyways, they built these here little ditches one day whenever they landed on their boats, and the Dacy noticed this going on, and they were like, "What in the fuck is going on with these 100 or so boys up on top of a hill building a fort?" They're like, "This isn't on at all." So they weren't really an army. They were basically an angry mob of about 200 men. walked out of Waterford and walked up this hill armed, and they started, fighting the English. The English seen, or the Normans English, whatever, started fighting with them. And the English left where they had made their little camp, and the English started getting the head kicked at them, and they retreated back into their little camp that they'd made, and from then they started firing arrows out at the Irish, and arrows, sieges, all this kind of. This wasn't in an Irish war mindset, this was someone landing with a laser weapon, basically, volleys of arrow fire. We used to use little darts or slings. That was our aerial weapons or projectile weapons at the time. But the English were able to fire these fucking longbows halfway, couple 100 or so yards plus, But basically, what happened was that whenever the English were retreating back to the Daisy, who weren't a very kind of professional army, they were just basically a bunch of local lads. They started chasing after the English. But what happened was that the English were able to turn around whenever a group of them broke away. That the English could turn on them and start kicking the head of them. By the end of the fight, out of about the 200 Waterford crowd, about 40 or so escaped, and 70 were captured, and including the the leader of the Daisy. And the leader of the Daisy, he was released, but the other 70, they all got beheaded on the spot, which wasn't really a sound thing to do, even in those times during war, So once they kind of had a beachhead in Waterford sorted out, that's when Strongbow landed, and Strongbow landed with somewhere between about 1,000 and 1,500 men, depending on where you hear, And Dermot of Leinster came and met him, and they done all their, ceremonial stuff, renewing their allegiance and all this kind of stuff with each other. So they were like, all right, sure, Waterford's only up the road. So they decided to besiege what was left of Waterford. And despite being, they must have numbered probably about 2,000 soldiers at this stage. And Waterford was basically, there's barely a man left living in it after 200 being slaughtered. But the last few men, it took days and days for the English to actually break in to Waterford. But they did get in anyway, and it was the whole garrison was killed, and the Saxons or the invaders, they went to kill the king of the Daisy, O'Phelan. He was only spared because basically that Dermot McMorrow didn't want to have to try and explain why are your foreign troops executing Irish people, Irish kings on our side, But after Waterford was taken, basically the McMorrow, he was like, yeah, we're on to a winner here now, so he went and sent for his daughter, who was called Aoife, that he had promised to Strongbow, and he married the two of them off. So Strongbow knew that he was going to be, the king of Leinster whenever Dermot popped his clouds. So, anyways, Dermot, he was like, great, fuck it, on to a winner. He was like, next port of call, we know the tactics of this crowd, or we know the idea of this kind of siege. These English boys, they know how to siege and stuff like that. So they turned around and they went back and marched towards Dublin again. And it was actually, this is around the time Lawrence O'Toole was actually the Archbishop of the place at the time, and he was sent out to negotiate, to plead, oh, we had a deal, don't be breaking ceasefires, that's just Judas, But basically, while the negotiation was going on, the Brits, they found, they breached the wall of the town, and they went in and they slaughtered everybody, men, women and children, everyone just got slaughtered. A couple of people, all right, a proportion of the city managed to escape in boats, basically, but anyone that was left on land was just completely wiped out, which was completely against the rules of warfare back then. It used to be that if a city gave up, they survived. That was it. Like they just became your city, and then but Dermot was just he was in a rage. Like he was just mental. So Dermot just installed one of his little puppets called Milo Cogan in charge, like, and basically to start kind of repopulating the city with his own people. Like this is like I remember a while back they were saying like, oh, the Vikings, what was it, helped boost the Irish population when it was magically collapsing and all this, and it was like there was very fucking few Vikings left, like, you know, at a certain stage there, like very, very few, couple of thousand, like, you know, like, this would have been a time when there would have been nearly 1 million people living in Ireland, like, or, you know, 700,000 anyway, you know, and maybe a couple of thousand was Vikings, and that was it. But anyways, that's kind of a story for a different day. But because of the strength that Dermot had kind of built up over a while anyway, he decided to go and kick the head of Tiernan O'Rourke, who had caused all his grief in his head, like that. It was all Tiernan O'Rourke's fault. So basically, he marched up towards like Leitrim kind of area, and at this stage, O'Connor was kind of like, "Oh, sham, this is not a good situation," like, because he'd just been sitting watching, thinking like, "Oh, if we just leave him, he'll just keep rambling around Leinster for a while until he settles down." Like, and it didn't happen. Like, he started attacking people up towards the Connacht and Ulster end of the country. So obviously O'Connor was just like, "Oh, here, this is it." Like, so let me see that. Yeah, O'Connor sent a message to Dermot, and he said, "If you don't stop all this kind of crack, I'm going to fucking execute your son." Like, you know, no ifs and buts. And Dermot just sent back another message going, "You can kill him if you like. You know, I'm coming to be the High King of Ireland." And obviously that was kind of like, oh fuck. But the thing was that this was late in the year. This would have been like whenever, you know, would have been like September time, roughly, August, September. And it was traditional in Irish warfare that it was kind of like the ground was too wet to fight properly in the winter. So Dermot decided to go back to Ferns, and his army like encamped in different places that there wouldn't be, you know, basically there'd be no action until the next spring. But the thing was that because his daughter was married off to Strongbow, and because Strongbow was, you know, assumed to be the next King of Leinster, it was very, very strange that winter Dermot McMorrow suddenly died, even though he was a very strong man. Died down in Ferns in the middle of the night. But at this point now, obviously in history, that's the end of the Irish influence on its civil war, led by Dermot McMorrow. Now we had foreigners who had nothing to lose, rampaging with a big army around the country that had taken massive amounts of gold, that had the British backing of them, King Henry, that had the Irish nearly in disarray because people were arguing with the clergy because they had said to leave this sit for a while, you know, try not to aggravate the situation. But the Irish were too honourable nearly to stand up for themselves, you know. So basically, I might do a part two on this, and I'll try and do out a bit of better notes. Like, I just kind of have words and scribble on a page, but yeah, but I might do out a couple of notes and just do a part two, maybe up to a different point, because I just think I'm a big believer in, like, if you don't learn from your history, you're going to repeat it. And I think in this last week, that's what got me thinking about this. Like, you know, I'm not saying it's the exact same, but there's a big argument going on, and it's like there's definitely some parallels you could be bringing in here, like, you know, about a powerful foreign helper coming in to help this poor little fella who, you know, debatably might have done some wrong, like, or depending on your point of view. But yeah, probably do a part two maybe of how things could turn out, or how things did turn out, I suppose, in this situation. But yeah, thanks for listening anyway, and I'm sorry for uh, you know running out every so often of my train of thought and all that kind of crack. But yeah, just yeah, I think it's important. Like, it's nearly it is as important as our language to learn our history, and to be able to give a good recollection of what happened is beyond what is given you in the Irish educational system. Like, and it's like, even to know what was going on in different parts of the country at different stages. Like, the next stage, there's like, from when Strongbow takes over, we're intertwined with English history. Like, the King of England starts making declarations about his subjects in Ireland, and that directly affects us. It directly affects, the Normans in Ireland, and it directly affects basically Western European, you know, today. Like, Western European culture today, like, and who speaks what where and all that kind of, and it's yeah, I just think it's important. Like, and I know I'm probably not the best to talk about it, like, but it's just learn your history, or you're doomed to repeat it. So I leave it on that anyway. And thanks for listening, folks. Good luck.